I feel like we've lived in a 3-year winter or so, and this is something that I've kind of looked at from a unique lens just even the last few months. And what I mean by winter, I certainly don't mean cold weather. I mean what's happened to the world as a result of the pandemic. And even though the national emergency was lifted and things feel like they're getting somewhat back to normal, we're still seeing like the exposure of the craziest, most evil, impure things you could possibly imagine. But at the same time, God's people, like us, you, listener, we have this window of opportunity to grab hold of what God has for us, to be set apart like in Goshen. And I believe so wholeheartedly that this window of opportunity is not going to be open for very long. And I believe that also that after we've come out of this, especially since we were shut down and we lived in such a virtual matrix, that we found ourselves in a transactional world and everything was online and our eyeballs are tired and we just want to get back to a level of community and relationship in every aspect of our life, that favor is going to be showered upon. And that's what we're going to talk about here on the Turned On podcast. What David and I realized a few months ago, what we're doing now, and what we're going to do here to help you guys recover and come out of this in the land of milk and honey where you belong.
Yeah. Angelique, you know, as I wake up every morning, and some mornings my spirit wakes me up. Most mornings my spirit wakes me up, you know. It's not like the days in my 20s when I would wake up whenever I just woke up. I wake up with things in my mind, and I think a lot of people are like that. As we fade this music out, I think a lot of people are like that, and their spirit's waking them up early. Sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it's a stressful thing. But what I would say is, going back to 2019, writing the Turned On book, I mentioned the movie Groundhog Day. And I feel like, you know, us living in this current matrix, that's another movie that we mentioned in the book, but take those two movies. Living in a matrix where we wonder every day, how much control do we really have? What's going on behind the scenes? What is real and what is not? This is not about conspiracy theories. This is about reality. Like, we just don't know what sometimes reality is. We don't know who's pulling the strings, but we know that God is in control. So let's go back into our world, what you're talking about and what we realized. And I think that the Groundhog Day theory is, what we do is we get put into situations where things become repetitive, and then they become a habit. And then we think, oh, it's just a little while, but then weeks and months pass and even years pass. Then we wake up and say, well, what now? You know, and so we want to give solutions. And I think that's where we're going with this today, is the solution to everything that people are looking for comes from movement, comes from studying what it takes to get ahead, not in all the little books that are put out by God's with a what, Ange? The small G, right? Mm-hmm. But by the big book. Where is movement? You mentioned the Israelites. We talk about having to move through a desert in order to get to the land of milk and honey. But what does that really mean? You know, I think the Bible is a great book to root ourselves in, but if we're not talking about how it relates to our present times and how we can live it out right here, right now, then it's just feel-good stuff. And I don't think it was meant to just be a feel-good stuff. I think it was meant to be a book of action, a book of movement. And so what did we realize most, Ange, when we come out of this season? What did you think was the big aha moment that we can relate to our listeners right now?
I just think people are ready for relationship. They're up for the relationship now. They're up for community again. I think that there has been a famine of just lack of human connection. And it's interesting because it almost makes the book Turned On prophetic. You know, you were talking about getting back to community, and that book was published that literally when the world shut down. And so when we think about this podcast, this was positioned in a time right before the pandemic as well. We were talking about getting back to community, and instead the world was separating everybody. And, we even went through our own transactional, season where relationships were just not what they used to be. We were not in the community that we're so used to. And it started with us walking away from one business and moving into, kind of consulting roles all through 2020, an e-commerce forward-facing customer type model. And what we realized is that we're in a place now where we have to look at the needs of the marketplace and the needs of his people. And, if you look at how the world is positioned right now, we're all looking for something. There's hope for something, but you have to ask yourself, what does God always ask us to steward? One is our relationship with him, where he can read his word back to us, right, and fill us up. The other is our temple. We have to physically take care of ourselves. What we put in our body matters. How we move our body matters. And then our marriage and home team. And then finally, where we're putting our gifts and talents. And so these are things that we always try to take a zoomed out, bird's eye view of when we feel like things are chaotic or out of order. It's something that I care deeply about. And I noticed at one point, as a matter of fact, David and I were having a discussion, I don't know, it was probably 6 months ago. So I said, has our ship sailed? Like, what are we doing? We just felt like we were out of our gifts and talents. We felt like we were not in the same place that we know that we can thrive in as a family, but as leaders to disciple others. And moreover, importantly, just in our own health and relationships at home. Like we just kind of felt disjointed. And recently, these things have all changed very suddenly, and we've been praying for God, to roll out that kind of red carpet. But we're going to talk to you today about what it means to simply steward these things and be in a more relational place versus a transactional one. Because the world, when it did what it did, it put us all in a place where we were just watching everybody else and pushing buttons. And everything from how we bought things to how we joined people was through the push of a button, versus actually being in community. That doesn't mean that we don't utilize tools that make things simpler for our lives, but they actually became more complicated and more painful and lonely. Would you agree, David?
Yeah. And it's ironic because I look at what I use most mornings is the John Maxwell Leadership Bible. And I just happened to stumble upon this. It says, the role of the wilderness. And I know Christians love to talk about the wilderness. We all know what that is. But think about how that's changed from the time that the book was written to now, what that wilderness looks like. Like when Jesus went into the wilderness, it was a literal wilderness. I think our wilderness was a concrete indoor wilderness, which we had to emerge from. And it's not easy. And Maxwell says the role of the wilderness in the preparation of a leader cannot be overemphasized, And the very first thing it says is, so what happens to leaders in this wilderness season? And it says, we recognize that God will lead us into seasons of growth, not necessarily gratification automatically. So where have you grown? Where have we grown? And sometimes it's hard to see the blessing that happened until a little bit later. And so I think most people are asking themselves that question is, how do we emerge from this and still protect ourselves? Angelique, you and I talked about two things. We talked about immunity, right? We wanted immunity, and we looked for something to help us with inflammation. So think about that, guys. There's two sides to everything. There's a physical world and there's a spiritual world. So immunity from a physical world and immunity in a spiritual world are two totally different things, but it's still the same thing. Immunity is to protect yourselves. Okay? When we think about that, immunity means to protect yourself. So what are you looking to protect yourself from? Well, spiritually, you don't have to look very far, do we, Angelique, to see what we need to protect ourselves from spiritually. It's in our stores when you walk in the front door of a store. that's recently been in the news. We don't even have to mention its name. It's on your phone every time you open it up. It's maybe on your beer can. It's certainly in your schools, and it's even infiltrated some of your churches. How do you how do you create immunity from those things? Well, sometimes you just block them out. Sometimes you don't go to that store. Sometimes you don't purchase that beer. Sometimes many of us have pulled our kids out of those schools. But the immunity comes when you take action. And I think that's what it means. It means saying, this is my set of standards that I will stand for, and these are the things that I will not stand for. So, okay, let's take that and say, what about our physical immunity? Well, do you have control of the things that go in your body? Yes, most of the time. Do you have a reference for what they are? Most of the time. Sometimes we don't. When you go out to dinner, guess what? You don't know what is going in your body. It tastes good, but you don't know who made it. Even your grocery store, Angelique, we go back to the beginning of when we got together, and I was like, well, everything in the grocery store has got to be good for you because our grocery stores have our best interest at hand, don't they?
So let me chime in here for a second. When you talked about spiritual immunity, I think the primary ways that we protect ourselves, one, obviously, is getting in the Word, but two, it's like protecting our eyes and protecting our mind. You know, like we can't live in a bubble, so we're going to be exposed to things mentally through thoughts and through our sight that are just not of God. I mean, that's the world we live in. But the Word of God is going to keep us filtering that information. And so when you have the eyes to see, when you're turned on, that's what this is about, you start to receive that information differently than the rest of the world. And you then create immunity from it. You're like, you know what? This is what the Word says versus what that says, and this is how I'm going to choose to live, choose to think, and choose to maybe boycott, to stay away from the things that essentially can cause a virus to your spirit, right? A cancer to your spirit. So that's why we homeschool, right? That's why we do certain things as a family, have boycotted certain brands and companies because we don't want to be around it. But physically, I think about even my friend Kim Lato, who has a book called Fit God's Way. She and I were talking once about one of the first things that we do just when it comes to eating. And she goes, here I am, blessing my food. I'm asking Jesus to sit at the table with me, and I have my phone in front of me when I'm eating. She's like, so I just asked Jesus to sit here with me and eat, and I'm distracting myself with my phone. And I was like, wow, that is really powerful. Think about how the world is behaving right now, where we don't take the time to be present even with our food, that we don't sanctify our food, that we don't make healthy choices because we're in a hurry or because it's simple and easy to go the cheap route, and that's the same thing in business. I start thinking about that as well. But David, did you want to say something about where we're at on this physical immunity?
You mentioned Kim Lato, and I'm reading her devotional here, Strong, Confident, His. And it's a faith and fitness devotional. There's just one part where she says, it's a prayer. She says, Dear God, I've been circling this mountain of trying to get healthy for years. I feel like I've been on an emotional roller coaster, and it's consumed my thoughts and robbed me of my happiness, health, and confidence. Being stuck in this cycle. She goes, I haven't been able to be the best for you, but I want to be. Your word says I've circled this mountain long enough. Now go north. And that if I seek you first, that all the things will be added to me. She says, Lord, you are my north, and today I offer you a brand new start. In Jesus' name, amen. So that north, God laid out everything for us. When we talk about north, I think that looks to what did he put on this earth to give us health? What did he provide? Not in the form of a pharmaceutical, but in the form of a phytonutrient, in the form of something that he has put on this planet that grows in the soil, that is nurtured by God, that is nurtured by the soil that he created. And I think that's where the north comes. I think we try to really complicate things when really all we have to do is keep it simple.
That's so good. And, just recently in terms of our new business as well, and like the team that we're working with, physical immunity is a huge piece of what we do. And this is a hill I'll die on. I care really deeply about health, holistic health. I mean, David, like what's it been like to be married to me all these years? Just.
Do you really want to know? I mean,
yes.
It's been a blessing in terms of what I've learned, but I was not a great student. I fought her most.
You still do
of the
from
way.
time to time.
Yeah.
But we do care very deeply about this topic. And look, we're realists, like we eat at Chick-fil-A, so it happens. But at the same time, what can we do? Again, going back to our first spiritual immunity is being aware of our enemy, being aware of what's out there, being aware what's in our foods, being aware what's in our air, being aware what's being released into the air, like things of that nature just makes us see differently. And then we say, okay, well, I can't live in a bubble. So what am I going to do to ensure that I can live the most prolonged, healthy life and honor my temple at its finest through what God provides us? And obviously that has some simple things that we can apply each and every day. And we're on a protocol now that has been literally the simplest thing that we've ever done to live holistically. And we feel amazing. All of it's a cellular absorption technology that basically drives the purest phytonutrients into our cells, almost like we were getting an IV every day, but we just have it through the convenience of getting it in our mouth. And that's a simple way that we are addressing living physically immune from what's going on in this world. And I think that's an important topic that maybe we're just not tackling enough. And here's the thing. How more confused could we be on this topic, considering that you can't even open the internet or your phone these days without getting a million different downloads of take this, do that, don't eat this, don't drink that. And it's overwhelming. It's really overwhelming. So people may have good intentions, but they honestly don't know, or they can't keep up with all the information.
Well, let me tell you, let me just be simple. I'll be the guinea pig, because I'm the one who didn't know much years ago, and I continue to learn. And it wasn't until I went to functional health doctors, and then a couple of years ago, I learned that inflammation is really the root cause of all disease. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, what does that mean? And then I studied it a little bit, and basically, inflammation is the body's natural defense system against things like viruses and bacteria. And there's chronic inflammation and there's acute inflammation. But what happens is when we address inflammation, then all those other things are manageable. And you taught me this. And I've been to naturopaths, and I've been to functional medicine docs, and they all said you have to get the inflammation down. And they've listed a bunch of things that we take, and that can get overwhelming. So, Ange, how do we make it easy? How do we make it simple for people who say, I don't have that kind of time and energy and to look up all these things. I don't want to take 50 different things, and I'm not even sure what I'm doing. How do you simplify it in a nutshell?
I don't know if you can hear my little one, but she just came into our podcast studio and asked me for veggie straws. And that's definitely not how you start bringing inflammation down, but there could be worse things. It's 8:30 in the morning, Noah. We shouldn't be eating veggie straws. Look, in the past, what I would do is when, David asked this question, like, what do I tell someone to do? In the past, my initial thought was, well, you've got to go, find a holistic health practitioner, or an integrative health practitioner, or a naturopath, or a functional medicine doctor, simply because they understand these things. And I still recommend that, especially if you're feeling like you can't get answers. Maybe you don't feel good. Maybe you can't lose weight. Maybe look, and weight is usually just a result of massive, massive inflammation that has occurred on so many different levels. Of course, habits come into play too, but inflammatory habits, obviously. But now I said, like, we have a really simple protocol. If that's something that you're interested in, we'll put something here at the end of the show for you to contact us. But it's been game-changing for us, honestly. And this is for, someone like myself who's been at this game for a long time. It's not practical every time to tell somebody go see a functional doctor. It's not practical to carry around a bag of supplements everywhere you go. I mean, that was the life I lived for several years when I met my own enemy of my health journey and had to go through a very long and painful healing protocol. So those things are necessary, I think, as well, because we're facing some real things that we need to drive out of the body. But frankly, I think we can simplify it and definitely make a routine really simple and easy for you to follow.
Well, if we go back to something else that I think is extremely important is I don't like to be caught off guard. And I think we were all caught off guard in 2020. Let's be honest, right? We were like, what's happening? And it happened real quick. And so there's a word I like to use. It's called proactive. You know, what's the opposite of proactive, Ange?
Reactive.
Okay. Now, here's a simple question out there. Would you guys rather be proactive or reactive?
Proactive for me.
Okay. Now, why there's nothing that's a magic bullet out there that just encapsulates us, right? We saw people do that. We saw people live in a bubble. We saw people that wouldn't touch people, go outside or do anything. We saw people that was wearing
like that.
ridiculous, not just the regular mask. I see people outside on a bicycle wearing a mask and they're by themselves, and I don't get that. But I'm talking about like a literal bubble that people would sometimes put themselves in. So I like to be proactive, and all that means is, you know, I want to put the best things in my body. That way, when something comes around, that I have a chance to fight it off. I mean, even with our children, I mean, let's be honest, in everyday life, you know, you take your kids to a party, you take your kids to the park, and then a mom calls you, hey, yeah, I just want to let you know that, you know, little Sharon was vomiting after playing with your kids, and you know, and then you're just sitting around waiting to see if that was a virus or something. So we like to make sure that our kids are full of good stuff to protect them and be proactive, understanding that, you know, getting sick is a part of childhood and that builds your immune system, but how can we put things in that are natural phytonutrients to help our children? And as adults, look, guys, let's be honest. The modern processed diet contains very, very little antioxidants or real nutrients.
Oh, yeah.
And every day, what happens? We're bombarded, literally, with these pollutants. Like, we don't see them. We don't know what's going on. One thing I really learned is preservatives. When I went on an elimination diet, what kind of preservatives are in our food that we're eating?
Oh, they're everywhere.
And then the other thing is stress, which people, you know, you can't avoid. I mean, we're probably more stressed out now than we've been in decades. You know, stress wreaks havoc on the body and premature aging, if for nothing else, you know. And so what we need to do, guys, is we really need to nourish our body on a cellular level. We need to fill in those gaps in the diet. And Angela used to tell me that, fill in the gaps. And believe me, my gaps were huge. I had not gaps, but I had canyons that needed to be filled in. But, you know, as you get older, you realize that these things matter. I mean, I tell people now, my goal was to have 20-inch arms when I was in my 20s, right? And I got up to like 18 and a half, you know? I mean, you couldn't find a picture of me that I wasn't flexing in up until I was about 35. But what happened at 39 is Ella was born. And when I tell you guys this, honestly, in the millisecond that I saw her enter this world, instantly, and I'm not kidding, the first thing that changed in that delivery room was David. I had this little conversation with myself. I said, David, what the hell are you doing worrying about your biceps so much? I go, this child's going to need you for a long time. You better start thinking about what's going on the inside. You better start, you know, paying attention to the things you can't see on the inside. And it was like a light switch that flipped on. And so anybody out there who's had children recently or is about to have children, you know that that's important. You know, I just lost my dad in January. He lived a great life, 84 years old. But still, there's genetic things that we have to worry about. And there's things that, you know, in his day and age when he grew up that he probably didn't have to deal with all the other stuff. Because even though they didn't have an organic section of the food in the grocery store, everything was organic because they didn't have all this high processed
right. There was no processed ingredient. It was all whole food ingredients. And that's where we've lost our way. You know, and I think, but here's the thing, like, let's move in, you know, so we don't drag this out. Like, let's move into where we found ourselves from a business perspective. I mean, the whole world is so transactional right now, and e-commerce is such a big deal. And it's obviously how the majority of things are bought and sold these days. I mean, you can buy a car now through e-commerce, you know, and online. I'm not saying that it's an enemy and that's where everything's going, but wouldn't you think that the most collateral ROI comes from relationships? I mean, Because of my relationships, because of the relationships we've built over the years, we have the ability to create a business out of thin air. We have the ability to build teams and disciple people. Because of relationships, I know I can have a trustworthy conversation with somebody when I'm ready to go buy a car, because that relationship is something that I entrust in, and that's the trust transaction, right? Credit card transactions happen as a result of trust. And trust happens as a result of relationship, creating bond. And that's the business that we're in. We've been in the direct sale industry, network marketing industry for 11 years, 10 of which we've been full-time, been fully unemployable. It has brought us home with our children to create positive cash flow, to build other businesses, to fund things like this podcast, David's books, everything else, our events, the things that we've been able to go on and create, homeschool our children. Like, it's a very noble business. And the reason why is because it's the opportunity for us to disciple people. I think that people misunderstand what network marketing is. You are marketing within your network of trusted people and relationships to buy things that you have had a blessed, meaningful experience with, that you want to share with those that you love. And instead of the middlemen getting a commission, you get it, or your friend gets it, or so on and so forth. And so I think of business as very relational. And that's why I think that business model works when done properly.
Yeah, I love it. And I miss people, and I miss being around people. And I think people were excited to work from home and to be able to spend more time with their families and stuff. But then we became prisoners of these four walls. So
yep.
In my book, it's ironic because in my book Turned On, I was talking to this lady yesterday at the grocery store, and this was literally just yesterday. And she goes, "It's really quiet in here today." She goes, "But you know what? The part where people order online and then just coming and they have it delivered, we can't keep up with it." And I said, "You know what, ma'am?" I wrote a book about that in 2019 where I said you could basically probably live in your house for a year and survive, maybe longer, without ever having to leave. I mean, you could have things delivered to you. You can work from home. But what happens is we lose a sense of community. We lose a sense of being alive. God didn't put us on this earth to be locked into our house and just do everything on the computer. He put us on this earth to be in community, in communion. You know, communion is one of those things in the Bible. It tells us to break bread together. It tells us to meet together. It tells us that being alone is not good. There are several places in the Bible where it says being alone to yourself is not good. And that's what happened when we started to get turned off. And then the pandemic came in and just exasperated that. People want to be around people. You know, when we do events, we educate people, and then we have a party. You know, I remember that one year we had a hip hop party, and you asked me, what does hip hop have to do with our business? I'm like, because people love hip hop and want to get dressed up and we want to dance to old school hip hop, you know, like Rob Bass, put it on. Let's have fun. And people came to the event, they learned, they grew their business, they brought other people. And then afterward, what did we do? We had fun. And so, you know, fun is my core personality. Fun is one of my core values. But we can't have fun if we're not healthy. We can't have fun if we don't have the ability to make money. You know, no one's having fun that's stressed out about their bills. No one's having fun that can't get off the couch and dance for 15 minutes without, you know, taking a break because they can't catch their breath. So all these things I think are interchangeable, and I think that's what we bring to the table right now is we say, hey, you know what? If you want to have fun, if you want to make money, if you want to be in community, if you want to get healthy, if you want to help people and serve, and then for us, most important is take that money and put it back into what can we give back? What can we do? How can we not only give our words to God, but give our money back?
You know, it's funny, as you said that, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, if you were in like a room of people right now, and besides just the two of us, and you said, okay, if I were to offer you an opportunity to be a part of a community that believes these things, that cares deeply about holistic health and longevity of the human temple, that will build your faith, build community, help you make money, and then fund other things that you feel you're on mission for, who would be up for that? And I think everybody's hand would go up. And yet sometimes you're in any business, you'll get no's, and you're just like, do you even know what you're saying no to? Like, you don't know what you're saying no to. So if you're saying yes in your spirit to all of these things, like let the people that have gone before you disciple you. That would be David and I. That would be our partners. And that's what we feel that the world is ready for right now. And quite frankly, like it's been so exciting. We've just the team of people, I really feel God has built this community over the last couple of months. And it's been so life-giving, not only from a physical standpoint to be feeling as good as we have, but seeing that that really create a phenomenal impact on other people's lives physically. And at the same time, like spiritually, the collateral, relationally, the collateral, and then finally the financial collateral as well. So if this is something that interests you, there's a couple ways that you can reach us. One, you can always find David and I on Instagram or Facebook. Just search our names. The final piece is just text the word team. Text the word team to 731-224-7444. Again, that's 731-224-7444. And I'll get back to you personally. Stay turned on.